Hello, everybody. Welcome to Liam's Library. I really couldn't be bothered doing this review today. I think it's been about a week and a half since I've spoke to everybody. And my last three reviews, I promised you that I'd do a book to film review on The Green Mile. I recently read it for probably not going to exaggerate, not going to say 20 times. I reckon I've read The Green Mile maybe 7 or 8 times. This is probably the 8th time. I don't have all my books with me at the moment. They're all up at my where I used to live up in the country. I'll be picking them up tomorrow, so my book reviews are going to start again. But I read this because it was what I had lying around, so it was definitely worthy of a review because the film that came out in 1999, based on this book by Frank Darabont, is a really great adaptation. So, if there was, I like my book to film segments. I recently did one on 1922 by Stephen King. I think that's a great novella. It was a great movie. So, I thought it was time to do The Green Mile, because you are Stephen King fans, especially the kind of Stephen King fans that kind of annoy me, like, what's your favourite book? The Stand, The Green Mile. It's like, come on, have a personal favourite. Like me, do Marquee and Roadwork. Read them all and have a different opinion than the masses, I guess. But so I've made a few notes. I've got a couple of pages of notes here. But I mean, let's talk about this. So if you've read the book and you've seen the movie, you'll notice there are differences. It follows the story of a man in his 40s named Paul Edgecombe who works in a prison facility in the 30s. And he oversees all the executions on death row. And a quite remarkable man comes along named John Coffey. He's like this 7-foot African-American man who is accused of raping and murdering 2 little girls. Now, the intro to the book and movie are horrible, like you can imagine. And Stephen King doesn't really hold back, especially with this story. And Frank Darabont, when he's putting book to film, really, gives you what the book gives you. He doesn't pull any punches. But there's something about this man. So, all right, I'm not going to go so much into plot. If you haven't seen The Green Mile, just go see it. If you haven't read The Green Mile, it's definitely worth a read. The book originally came out as a serial novel, as a series of novels. So, you'd get the first one. It come out in 6 parts. The first one was The Two Dead Girls. And then you had to wait for Stephen King to publish the next one. And, he hadn't even finished writing it yet when we were reading the first one. So it was exciting. He copied Charles Dickens. Charles Dickens did that in the 1800s. And people apparently would fall off the wharf waiting for the boat to rock into London to get their copies of the next Charles Dickens serial novel installment. So King thought, it'd be fun to do it. And The Green Mile is what came out of that. So basic plot, this big guy, his name's John Coffey, apparently murdered these 2 little girls. He's on death row. But did he do it? Now, the thing is, we don't know that yet. He might have done it. He may not have done it. It's a pretty cut, open and shut case. But the thing is, he's got this gift. He's got this gift. Now, the gift is from God, from Jesus, right? Now, as an atheist, that part doesn't really interest me. I love the story, though. Stephen King is really well known for doing the good versus evil. He does it so much it's not funny. But there's a couple of books that really play on it, like The Stand. That really is God versus the devil. The Green Mile really is, you can only believe in this if you believe there really is a God. So, Stephen King's pretty much telling you, yes, there is, and he's giving this guy this gift to heal, and if you're about to die, he can take away your death. Excuse me. So, okay, I remember watching an interview with Rob Reiner once. Now, Rob Reiner directed Misery and Stand By Me, 2 other Stephen King properties. And he said, Stephen King has these fantastic characters with this really real, rich dialogue, but he surrounds them in all this supernatural mayhem, right? And that never interested Rob Reiner. So when he read The Body, which turns into the movie Stand By Me, he was like, wow, this is exactly what I wanted from Stephen King. You know, there's none of this over the top supernatural bullshit like evil clowns and monsters and aliens. This is just a story about a group of kids. So, you know, he wanted to adapt that, and he done it perfectly as far as I'm concerned. I think Stand By Me is probably better than Shawshank Redemption. And Frank Darabont is good at that too. He leaves nearly word for word what is in this book. So you'll read a sentence in this book, and the actors in this film are nearly word for word going to say it. I saw this at the cinemas when I was 15 years old in 1999. My parents sat up the back, and I sat up in the middle because I didn't want to sit with them. And I just finished the books, and I had a great time. But like I was like, wow, this is like nearly word for word. This is one of the closest adaptations I've ever seen of a King property. My parents didn't like it, so like, and that's something else I wanted to say. Like, so you're watching this prison movie, and it's such a full-on prison movie, you know, death row executions. They do it really quite well. So you're watching this prison flick, and you think it's a prison flick, and then when the supernatural stuff starts and happens, you're like, oh, that's right, it's a Stephen King movie, and it takes quite a while for it to happen, and when it does, it's like, I think because my dad and my stepmom like really, they reckon, oh, we like it except for the supernatural shit. So to me, I could just imagine them sitting in the cinemas, and every time John Coffey like takes away someone's like health problems and breathes all them bugs out into the air, and then they disappear and all the lights flash, I could imagine my dad like tutting like fucking stupid far-fetched bullshit. And so I can't help, even though I love Stephen King's supernatural stuff, like that's what makes me want to do this channel. That's what makes me write my own stories and read all these books of Stephen King. But just this movie in particular, I could just picture my parents like pissing on it. And now I can't not see it that way. Every time like John Coffey releases the bugs, I always wonder what my dad thinks of this fucking movie. So alright, so yeah, I told you, like, you know, the translation, Frank Darabont does it so well, you know, because Frank Darabont also did Shawshank Redemption, and he did The Mist, and he did this. Okay, so now it starts off though with the main character, Paul Edgecombe, in his in his advanced age, and now he's in a old folks home. Now in the book, he's watching TV, and he hears a song on the TV that reminds him of when he was a guard on death row, and it reminds him of John Coffey, and he thinks, fuck it, like before I die or whatever, I better write all this stuff down. Like, you know, it's not for anybody to read, but it's just so he can get it down. Now, there's a lot of Stephen King books where your protagonist is writing the story that you're reading. And that's cool, I love that. Now, so that's what he does, and he's got this friend in there, she's an old lady, and she wants to know what's wrong with him, and he's like, okay, you know, when I finish writing these memoirs of mine, I'll let you read them. You know what I mean? When I'm close to finish, you can read them and tell me what you think. In the movie, it's really quick. It's just like the old guy's crying at the TV. He sits down with his old lady friend, and she wants to know what happened, so he just tells her. And there's no writing down of anything. It's all in one sitting. So by the time, the movie pretty much reaches its climax, we go back to the old folks' home, and they're still sitting there. I swear the sun hasn't even gone down, and he's told the whole story. Whereas in the book, it takes some time. It takes a while to get through that, you know? A bit more realistic. I mean, but, you know, you do have a bit more time in a book, so that's understandable. So, all right, now let's talk about actors. Okay, so actors, we've got Tom Hanks, we've got David Morse, Gary Sinise, William Sadler, Michael Clarke Duncan plays John Coffey. Now, the guy who plays Percy, now in the book, Percy's like this piece of shit, and he's like this evil prison guard. Now, Doug Hutchison, that's his name. The first time I ever saw Doug Hutchison was on one of the early episodes of X-Files called Tombs. And to this day, it's still my favourite episode of X-Files. It's scary as hell. He's the guy that, can stretch his fingertips and, hides in air ducts and, eats people. He's not human, even though he looks human. You know, Stephen King probably took a bit of that for The Outsider, I reckon. Maybe not the stretchy thing, but definitely just the human that looks human and consumes people. Tom Hanks is a great Paul Edgecombe. There's a character named Brutus Howell. And, in the book, he's got a temper. But in the movie, it's played by David Morse, and David Morse really brings makes the character a little scarier, because I love David Morse. He's fucking fantastic. And let's talk about repeating Stephen King characters. David Morse, William Sadler, and Gary Sinise. They frequent in Stephen King movies. That, it's if you're in a Stephen King movie and you're good at it, chances are they'll pick you again. Why not? Okay. So like I said, word for word, there's a bit where Gary Sinise is explaining to Tom Hanks, the rights and wrongs and whether John Coffey did it and whether he didn't do it. And Gary Sinise, nearly word for word in that scene. So read the book when he goes to visit the lawyer and they're talking about the dog that attacks the kid. That is nearly spot on word for word. And I like it. Even when I read the book, I picture Gary Sinise saying, in the end, you'll get bit. So, it's spot on. It's spot on. James Cromwell plays the warden. First time I saw James Cromwell was as the farmer in the movie Babe. And when I read the book, I picture James Cromwell. So that's pretty cool. That's why. A big part of this movie, right? Big part of this story, is the main character is constantly thinking about good and evil, right and wrong, guilty and innocent. Does God exist? If he does exist, why does he let these terrible things happen? If he does exist, why would he put this special gift into the hands of this big scary African American fella who's murdered these children? And the thing is, there's so much contemplation in this book. That's where the meat of the story is. Now, in this movie, you can't go into a character's head and see what they're thinking. So everything that you need to know is the only time is when Tom Hanks opens his mouth. So everything Tom Hanks says, all the dialogue, that's the only time you'll know what he's thinking about, whether John Coffey did this or that, whether he's thinking about going to find out if he's innocent or guilty. So there's none of that constant contemplation and that really in-depth thought that King puts into this book. And I don't think there would have been a way for Frank Darabont to put that on film. I think he got as close as anyone could have to explaining that part of it. So, that's as good as it could get. There's nothing wrong with it. This movie's fantastic. But like I said, if you really want the meat of the story, it's in the book. It's not really in the film. That's what I think. So, like I said, good and evil, The Stand. Now, so John Coffey, the character John Coffey, is very similar to John Coffey in the book, and in the movie they're very similar. So, as soon as John Coffey performs a miracle, he forgets that he's done it. He really does not know, much except for his name and how to spell it. And so, when Tom Hanks is like, thanks for helping me, because he takes away Tom Hanks' urinary infection. And he's like, thanks for what? And he's like, what you did. He's like, huh? And he really has no idea. So Michael Clarke Duncan in the movie really, really puts that across. There is a couple of scenes that are in the book that aren't in the movie, and I was kind of spewing about that. I know he grabs Tom Hanks' hand and passes some of his power onto him, but in the book, that scene is just so much better. Because John Coffey does it on purpose in the movie, whereas in the book, he's just kind of holding onto the main character's hand, and he's doing it by accident. And you don't know because the character's not saying anything, but he's seeing everything so clearly and the thoughts that are racing through his mind. And Stephen King describes it so well. It's a really cool, amazing scene. But in the movie, you can just pretty much just see Tom Hanks pulling a stupid face and fucking, rah, rah, rah. So it's as good as you could do. And also, what else was I going to say? I was going to say, okay, so Wild Bill. Now, there's a character named Wild Bill Wharton. And they cast Sam Rockwell to do this in the movie. And it's the first time I've ever seen Sam Rockwell in anything, even though he has been in stuff before this. But this movie made me, recognize who he was. He's amazing. He must have read this book and got Wild Bill to a T, because his dialogue's nearly word for word, but the energy and the maniacal crazy shit that he puts into it, he's a treat, and he's horrifying, and he's disgusting, and he's a real piece of shit, but he's a real fucking crack up. So Sam Worthington, this is the first time I've seen him, and anything Sam Worthington's in, I want to watch, because of the first time I saw him in Green Mile. So like I said, So the old folks' home stuff goes on a lot longer, and also in the book, there's an orderly named Brad Dolan. Now, he's actually this really sadistic orderly that constantly keeps picking on our old man protagonist, the one who's telling us the story of the Green Mile. Now, when I first put this movie on just the other day, I mean, like I said, I've seen it before, but I'd forgotten a few things. Straight away, you see an orderly sort of have a go at Tom Hanks about going for his long walks and that, but he's a really friendly guy. So straight away you think, oh, could that be Brad Dolan? No. There is no Brad Dolan in this movie. Which kind of sucks because there's a part, the book is more about, well, not more about, but there's a big part of the book where everything's repeating itself. So, like, Brad Dolan is like a repeat of the bad character Percy Wetmore in the 30s when he was a prison guard, and it bounces back and forth. Now, King does that all the time, especially with, his novel It, where everything starts repeating from 1958 to 1985. So that's cut out of the movie also. But, this movie's over three hours, so, they probably had to do it for time and probably felt like it slowed the movie down. You never know. I'm not a filmmaker, I wouldn't know, so. And also the sets, when I read the book, you read the book and, like, it's E-block and it's set in the 30s and everything's really old-fashioned and it's the Green Mile, the floor's all green and the jail cells. You really picture it. Now, Frank Darabont and his production crew must have had a great time designing these sets because it looks spot on and building the electric chair and really making it seem realistic. But it seems fun too. Now, Stephen King says that his original idea for this story was about a magician kind of a guy who gets put on death row. And he's working on this trick. And then by the time, he hadn't started writing it or anything, but it was just kicking around in his head. So by the time they come to execute him, they go to the jail cell and he's made himself disappear. Now that was the story he was going to write. And he reckons for months and months, he just couldn't get it to work until he changed the name of the character to John Coffey, changed the idea, and then wrote The Green Mile. All of a sudden, his prison story was working. He put the mouse in it. There's a mouse named Mr. Jingles. Who can do tricks. There's also some supernatural mouse stuff, which is cool. So it's got like a really fun element, but it's really dark, There's some really mean shit in this book and really mean shit in this movie. When I read the book, I know what I'm in for, but I can just keep reading like, fuck yeah, this is going to be terrible. In the movie, it's like, oh no, Percy's going to do this. Oh no, Wild Bill's going to do this. Oh, this is going to be sad. And I nearly want to skip forward some of the shit that I know is coming in the movie. It's kind of harder to watch than it is to read. Just my opinion. Yeah, like I said, a lot of mean shit happens. So, yeah, that's another thing, hard to watch. So, in the book, Edouard Delacroix has his execution in the electric chair. Now, they fry him in the book, and, Percy, the bad guard, he fucks up and he doesn't wet the sponge. So, this body nearly fries and burns in front of all the spectators, and it's horrible. It's absolutely a terrible death scene the way Stephen King describes it. Now Frank Darabont put some dummy or something in this chair and set it on fire and made it scream and move around. Didn't look like CGI to me, and then it sat there on fire. I think the execution of Edouard Delacroix in the movie is way nastier than in the book. Just seeing that, it's like, oh, fuck me. That's horrifying. So all the heartfelt John Coffey stuff, oh, it's a miracle and blah, blah, blah. And then you're watching that man frying the chairman. That's some R-rated shit right there. The character Melinda, the warden's wife, she has a brain tumour and John Coffey takes it away. In the book, I picture her just like I picture her in the movie. Now, I didn't Google the actress's name. I probably should know that. I know everybody else's fucking name. But I didn't Google it because I don't like Googling stuff before I do a review. But she's a great actress, and she is how I pictured the woman in the book too, Melinda Moore. And I keep saying, thank you, Darabont, because you're really, good at keeping all the good stuff in, all the good dialogue in, and changing very little from what you read. Now, the book and the film start with the two dead girls and what happens to them. And it starts and it ends with that. You know what I mean? And it's very fucking horrible, so it brings you back to the reality of the original crime. Now, I heard somewhere, I don't know if this is true, that John Coffey was supposed to be played by Shaquille O'Neal. Imagine how terrible that would have been. Sure, he's got the height, But fuck, Michael Clark Duncan and his intensity and the constant crying and just the fucking agony he's going through, Shaq wouldn't have been able to pull that off, man. No fucking way. So, spoilers, they kill John Coffey in an electric chair, okay? He dies. But the ramifications of that is like, think about it. So they've taken part and the healer is dead. They've killed a miracle of God, right? Even though they knew he was innocent. So they find out he was innocent. They know he was innocent. But, it's their jobs and they have to kill him anyway. But John Coffey wants to die. He's sick of all the pain. He's sick of all the anguish and the way people treat each other. So he's happy to go. But in the movie, they're like, right, we're killing, what am I going to, and Paul, Tom Hanks says, what am I going to say on the day that I stand before God and he asked me why I killed one of his most, fantastic miracles? Like, that it was my fucking job? And John Coffey's like, it's okay, boss, it's okay. But in the book, you actually have this flashback at the end of the book to how our main character's wife dies. She dies in a bus crash, and most of the people on the bus die except for Paul. Now, Paul runs over to his wife, and her head's all smashed in, she's fucked, there's blood everywhere, and it's raining, and there's no one coming to help him. And he looks under this underpass, and he sees John Coffey standing there, his big shape, and he screams for John to come and help him. Like, help me, please, save her like you saved all the other people right in front of me. But John isn't there. You know what? And for a second, that wasn't his imagination in the book. Like, John was there watching, wishing he could help, but he can't help. He's dead. John Coffey is dead, and Paul killed him. That is the ramifications. So that bit always gets me. It's like the deepest part of the book, I think, is the bus crash at the end of the book, and when you see Paul wanting Coffey to help, but Coffey's long dead, and he ain't coming back. And in the movie, they don't put that in the film, but they put the old man character explain how this is our atonement. I'll have to watch the people I love die, and the Green Mile is so long. And the end, but you don't ever see him screaming for John, I'd do anything to take it back, and there's no taking it back. Just like John says, I couldn't take it back. Well, Paul can't take it back either. John Coffey is dead, and it was Paul's fault. And, and there is no, as far as I'm concerned, that's a way more extreme and realistic way of explaining it. They should have put the bus crash in the movie. They really should have. I think I might leave it at that. Otherwise, I think I'd just be repeating myself. Like I said, the characters do a lot of sitting there in silence and contemplating, but you don't know what they're thinking until they open their mouth. Now, because there's a lot of deliberation about God and good and evil, and you've got to read the book to get the way King describes that constant conflict. You really do. I think I'll just leave it at that. Frank Darabont is fantastic. I'll also just let you know that I've been doing a lot of book to film, and I've been doing a lot of movies that just occur to me. I'm going to maybe tomorrow upload my, I did a Terminator review, Dark Fate. I'm going to upload that. And then I'm getting all my books back tomorrow. 4 big crates full of some really, really great books. And I'm going to go back to my roots. Originally, how I started this channel, it was just doing book reviews. That's why it's called Liam's Library. So I'm going to give movies a miss for a little while. And not to mention, I just finished the latest Stephen King book, literally last night, If It Bleeds, 4 novellas in one. So I'll upload this. I'll upload Terminator Dark Fate tomorrow. And then I'll do a review of If It Bleeds, probably on Thursday. I can't wait. And I'm just going to keep them coming. So I'll probably do some science fiction, some Ray Bradbury, some John Wyndham, some Joe Hill, a lot of Stephen King. I'm going to do some Dean Koontz. I'm going to give you whatever you want. And, I'm going to do some Robert R. McCammon. I have to do a review on The Border because it was such a good book. I can't wait to go back to giving you books. So, like I always say, read some great books. Watch some great fucking movies. And please, especially in these dark, dark times, look after one another. See ya.